David's hands shook as he tried to focus on the data screen in front of him. The numbers blurred together after 12 straight hours of work, but he needed to finish cataloging the behavioral patterns before his thesis advisor asked for another progress report. Around him, the xenobiology research wing sat empty and quiet. Everyone else had left hours ago when the solar storm warning started, but David stayed behind. He always stayed behind. The specimen chambers lined both walls of the long corridor, each one containing creatures from distant worlds. Most were in stasis, preserved for study. A few were alive but sedated, their containment fields humming softly in the darkness. David had walked past these chambers 1,000 times, but tonight something felt different. The air pressure seemed wrong. His ears popped as he stood up from his workstation. Then the lights flickered. David froze. The backup generators kicked in immediately, bathing everything in red emergency lighting. His tablet chirped with automated warnings about the solar storm interfering with station systems. He grabbed his equipment and started running toward the main control panel. If the containment fields failed even for a moment, the consequences would be catastrophic. He reached the control room and pulled up the system diagnostics. Most chambers showed green status indicators. A few flickered between yellow and green as the backup power struggled to maintain full strength. David's fingers flew across the interface, manually routing power to the most critical systems. His heart hammered in his chest. A loud clang echoed through the corridor behind him. David spun around. One of the chamber doors had slid halfway open. The red emergency lights cast long shadows across the floor, making it hard to see which chamber had failed. He grabbed a portable scanner and walked slowly back into the corridor. His breath came in short gasps. The training protocols ran through his mind. Stay calm, assess the situation, call for backup if needed. He did not need the scanner to tell him which door had opened. The chamber at the far end of the corridor gaped wide, its interior dark and empty. David's blood turned to ice. Chamber 73. The Ravager. Every graduate student in xenobiology knew about Ravagers. They came from the Outer Reach, a region of space so dangerous that the Galactic Council had quarantined it decades ago. Ravagers stood 7 feet tall on 4 legs, with 2 additional limbs that could function as either arms or legs depending on the terrain. Their bodies were covered in armored scales that could deflect most weapons. Rows of razor-sharp teeth filled their massive jaws. Bioluminescent markings ran along their spines, glowing different colors based on their emotional state. The galaxy knew them as mindless killers. Entire colonies had been destroyed by Ravager attacks. The creature in Chamber 73 had been captured during a military operation 6 months ago and transported to the station for study. It had been kept in deep stasis ever since, barely conscious. David stood perfectly still. His hand moved slowly toward the emergency comm device on his belt. Before he could reach it, something shifted in the shadows ahead. The Ravager emerged from the darkness like a nightmare, taking solid form. Its scales gleamed dull gray in the red light. The bioluminescent markings along its spine pulsed a deep orange color. Its 6 limbs moved with fluid grace as it stepped fully into the corridor. The creature was even larger than David remembered from the initial cataloging. Its head nearly brushed the ceiling. David could not move. His legs refused to obey his brain's frantic commands to run. The Ravager's eyes locked onto him. They were not the mindless, predatory eyes he expected. They looked intelligent, alert, and filled with pain. The creature took another step forward, then stopped. It tilted its massive head to one side, studying David. A low-frequency sound rumbled from deep in its chest. Not a growl. Something else. Something almost like a question. David's researcher instincts suddenly cut through his terror. He had spent 3 years studying predator communication patterns. He knew what curiosity looked like across dozens species. This creature was not preparing to attack. It was trying to understand what David was. His eyes tracked down the Ravager's body, looking for anything that might explain its behavior. There, on the creature's left shoulder, a wound, poorly healed with scar tissue that looked inflamed and painful. David had read the capture reports. The military team had used barbed nets and electrified restraints. This injury had never been properly treated. The Ravager made that low sound again. Its bioluminescent markings shifted from orange to a softer blue color. It took one more step forward, moving slowly as if trying not to frighten David. Something inside David's mind clicked. This was not a mindless monster. This was an injured, frightened creature that had just escaped from a cage. He thought about the animals back on Earth. Dogs, wolves, even bears. They attacked when they felt threatened, when they were in pain, when humans treated them like monsters instead of living beings. David took a deep breath. His hand moved away from the emergency comm device. He raised both hands slowly, palms out, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. His voice came out steadier than he expected. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The Ravager went completely still. Its markings pulsed brighter blue. David took one small step forward. Then another. His entire body screamed at him to run, but his mind knew better. Running would trigger a chase response. Showing fear would mark him as prey. He stopped just a few feet away from the creature. This close, he could see every detail. The individual scales. The intelligence in those strange eyes. The way the creature held its injured shoulder at an awkward angle to minimize pain. David slowly reached into his lab coat pocket and pulled out a basic medical kit. Every researcher carried one. He opened it carefully, showing the Ravager each item. Antiseptic, bandages, pain relief gel that worked on most carbon-based life forms. "Let me help you," David said softly. "Please." The Ravager watched him for a long moment. Then slowly it lowered its massive body to the floor and extended its injured shoulder toward David. David's hand shook again, but this time not from fear. He cleaned the wound as gently as possible, talking constantly in a low, soothing voice. The creature flinched once but did not pull away. When David applied the pain relief gel, the Ravager made a sound he had never heard before. A deep rumbling purr. He finished bandaging the wound and sat back on his heels. The Ravager lifted its head and looked directly into David's eyes. Then it did something that David would remember for the rest of his life. The creature leaned forward and pressed its massive forehead gently against David's chest. The gesture lasted only a moment, but the meaning was clear. Thank you. Trust. Bond. The moment shattered as alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed faster. David heard boots pounding down the corridor. The security team had detected the breach. The Ravager's head snapped up. Its markings flashed bright red. It moved with incredible speed, positioning its body between David and the approaching sounds. The creature's lips pulled back, revealing those terrible teeth. But it was not looking at David. It was facing the threat coming toward them both. A security team appeared at the end of the corridor, weapons raised. Through the window of the control room, more faces pressed against the glass. Everyone had seen what happened. A human student standing with a freed Ravager, the galaxy's most dangerous predator, protecting instead of attacking. The team leader's voice crackled over a speaker. "Step away from the creature. Move slowly. We have authorization to use lethal force." David looked at the Ravager. The creature was still positioned protectively in front of him, ready to defend but not attacking. He thought about everything he had learned. About how Earth's predators had become humanity's companions once people stopped seeing them as monsters. About how fear created the very violence it tried to prevent. He made his decision. David stood up and walked around the Ravager to stand between the creature and the security team's weapons. He spread his arms wide. "If you're going to shoot," David said, his voice carrying down the corridor, "you'll have to go through me first." The security team hesitated. Behind David, the Ravager made that low rumbling sound again. One massive paw reached out and gently touched David's back. Not pushing, just contact. Connection. The galaxy was about to learn something new about both Ravagers and humans. Nobody moved for what felt like an eternity. David stood with his arms spread wide, blocking the security team's line of fire. Behind him, the Ravager remained perfectly still except for the gentle glow of its bioluminescent markings, which had shifted from angry red back to calm blue. The creature's massive paw still rested lightly against David's back. More footsteps echoed through the corridors. Within minutes, half the station's personnel had gathered outside the xenobiology wing. David could see their faces through the windows. Fear, confusion, shock. Some of them were pulling out recording devices to document what was happening. A tall woman with silver hair pushed her way through the security team. Director Yara had run Orbital Station Meridian for 15 years, and her face showed every bit of the stress that came with the job. She looked at David, then at the Ravager, then back at David again. "Explain," she said. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority. Explain right now why I should not give the order to neutralize that creature. David lowered his arms slowly. He chose his words carefully, knowing that lives depended on what he said next. It's not attacking. Look at it, really look. The creature had multiple opportunities to kill me. Instead, it let me treat its wound. It responded to kindness. Everything we think we know about Ravagers is based on observations of captive, traumatized specimens. We've never studied them in peaceful conditions. One of the security officers spoke up. Those things destroyed the colony on Redstone. 3,000 people dead. I knew families there. I understand, David said. But what if those attacks happened because we attacked first? What if Ravagers respond to violence with violence just like most species do? Director Yara crossed her arms. That's a dangerous theory to test with your life, student. I already tested it. I'm still alive. An insectoid alien pushed through the crowd. Quillix was one of the senior researchers in xenobiology, with 4 compound eyes and delicate antennae that twitched constantly as they processed information. Quillix had mentored David during his first year at the station. Director, I have been reviewing the historical data while watching the situation develop, Quillix said, their translated voice clicking softly. David may be correct. Every documented Ravager attack occurred after we entered their territory with military vessels, after we captured their young for study, after we established mining operations on their worlds. We have no records of unprovoked Ravager aggression. Another alien stepped forward. This one resembled a bear covered in purple fur, with 6 arms and gentle eyes. River worked in the Botanical Research Division, but everyone on the station knew her. She was kind to everyone and never raised her voice. I have been watching the security footage, River said quietly. The creature was careful with David. Gentle. When it touched him, it was soft. Protective. These are not the actions of a mindless killer. Director Yara rubbed her temples. David could see her calculating risks and consequences. The station housed researchers from 40 different species. Some of them came from worlds that had suffered under Ravager attacks. This decision would not be popular no matter what she chose. I need proof, Yara finally said. Real proof that this creature will not harm anyone on this station. Can you provide that? David turned to look at the Ravager. The creature watched him with those intelligent eyes. Its bioluminescent markings pulsed softly, matching the rhythm of David's heartbeat. Could he prove it? How did you prove trust? An idea came to him. A dangerous idea, but the only one that made sense. David began removing his protective lab coat. The security team immediately raised their weapons higher. What are you doing? Yara demanded. Proving it, David said. He took off the coat, then his scanner belt, then every piece of equipment that might be used as a weapon or shield. He stood in just his basic clothing, completely vulnerable. If the Ravager wanted to kill me, nothing is stopping it now. He turned his back on the security team and faced the creature fully. Then he did something that made several people gasp out loud. He knelt down in front of the Ravager and lowered his head, exposing the back of his neck. It was the most vulnerable position a human could take in front of a predator. Your turn, David said softly to the creature. Show them who you really are. For a long moment, nothing happened. David's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. He could hear the security team's weapons powering up, ready to fire if the Ravager made any sudden moves. Then he felt it. The Ravager lowered its massive body to the ground beside him. The creature rolled slightly onto its side, exposing its underbelly. In the language of predators across 1,000 worlds, this meant the same thing. Submission, trust, peace. David heard gasps and murmurs from the watching crowd. He raised his head slowly and looked at the Ravager. The creature was watching him, and if David did not know better, he would swear it was smiling. He reached out and placed his hand on the Ravager's side. The scales felt warm under his palm. He could feel the creature's heartbeat strong and steady. The Ravager made that low purring sound again, deeper this time, almost like a hum. David stood up and helped the Ravager back to its feet. Then he sat down on the floor beside the creature and leaned against its side. The Ravager settled around him, forming a protective barrier with its body, but remaining relaxed and calm. There's your proof, David said to Director Yara. We're not enemies. We never had to be. Quillix was already pulling up data files on a portable screen. Their antennae vibrated with excitement. This changes everything. If Ravagers are social creatures capable of forming bonds, then we have misunderstood an entire species. The implications for xenobiology alone are staggering. Director Yara studied the scene for a long time. David could see the internal debate playing out across her face. Finally, she made her decision. Temporary observation period, 72 hours. You and the creature will be moved to a secure habitat chamber with full monitoring. If it shows any signs of aggression, any at all, we terminate immediately. Understood? David nodded. Understood. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The Galactic Council has already been notified of the containment breach. They're sending a representative. And David, you need to understand something. The Council's laws regarding Ravagers are absolute. They're classified as existential threats. That means mandatory termination on site, no exceptions. How long do we have? The Council ship will arrive in 3 days. 3 days. 72 hours to prove that an entire species had been misjudged. To show that fear and violence were choices, not inevitabilities. To demonstrate that understanding could bridge the gap between the most unlikely of companions. David looked at the Ravager. The creature tilted its head, and David could have sworn it understood the stakes. Those intelligent eyes held a question. Can you help me? Can we survive this together? We'll figure it out, David promised. He did not know if the Ravager understood his words, but the creature responded with that low, rumbling purr. Its bioluminescent markings glowed a soft, peaceful blue. As the security team cautiously escorted them toward the habitat chambers, David noticed something he had missed before. When the Ravager walked, it stayed perfectly in step with him, matching his pace. When he stumbled slightly over a threshold, the creature immediately steadied him with one massive paw. They moved together like they had known each other for years instead of hours. The habitat chamber was large and well-equipped. It had clearly been designed to house large predators in comfortable conditions. There were climate controls, soft surfaces for resting, and even some enrichment objects for mental stimulation. Through the transparent walls, dozens of researchers had already gathered to observe. David sat down on one of the padded platforms. The Ravager immediately settled beside him, close enough that David could feel its warmth. He started thinking out loud, a habit from years of working alone in labs. We need to establish communication, real communication. Your vocalizations have patterns, meanings. If I can decode them, I can prove you're sentient, prove you're capable of complex thought and emotion. The Ravager made a series of sounds, low-frequency rumbles mixed with higher-pitched tones. David grabbed a tablet and started recording. The creature seemed to understand what he was doing and repeated the sounds more slowly. Hours passed. David worked while the Ravager watched and occasionally contributed vocalizations. Other researchers brought them food. David noticed that the Ravager always waited for him to eat first before touching its own meal. When David offered it a piece of his food, the creature accepted gently, careful not to hurt him with its teeth. As the station's lights dimmed for the sleep cycle, David felt exhaustion catching up with him. He had been awake for almost 20 hours. The Ravager noticed his fatigue and made a soft, concerned sound. It shifted its position slightly, creating a more comfortable space for David to rest. David leaned back against the creature's warm side. The Ravager's heartbeat was steady and soothing. Its bioluminescent markings dimmed to a soft glow, just bright enough to provide gentle light in the darkness. I'm going to call you Ash, David murmured sleepily, because of the gray on your scales, and because you rose from the ashes of everyone's expectations. Is that okay? Ash made a sound that David chose to interpret as agreement. One Massey. David woke to the sound of Ash humming, not the low rumble from before, but something more complex, melodic. The frequencies rose and fell in patterns that seemed almost musical. He sat up carefully, not wanting to disturb the creature, but Ash had already noticed he was awake. The Ravager's bioluminescent markings brightened to a warm golden color. Good morning, David said, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His body ached from sleeping against Ash's scales, but he felt more rested than he had in weeks. There was something deeply comforting about having a protector nearby, even if that protector was supposed to be a galaxy-threatening monster. Ash made a series of sounds in response. Short chirps followed by a longer whistle. David grabbed his tablet and pulled up the recordings from the previous day. He had spent hours analyzing the vocalizations, and a pattern was starting to emerge. Certain sounds always appeared in specific contexts, When Ash was content, the frequencies stayed low and steady. When alert, they jumped higher. When interacting with David, there were unique combinations that did not appear in any other context. "You're talking to me, aren't you?" David whispered. "This whole time you've been trying to communicate and we just couldn't hear it." Ash tilted its massive head and made that chirping sound again. David played back his recording of it. Then Ash repeated the sound, but slower, with gaps between each frequency shift, like a teacher breaking down a lesson for a student. David's hands trembled as he set up his analysis equipment. This was bigger than just proving Ash was not dangerous. This was first contact with an intelligent species that everyone had dismissed as animals. If he could crack the code, if he could show that Ravagers had language, everything would change. He spent the next several hours in intense focus. Ash proved to be a patient teacher. When David got something wrong, the creature would pause and repeat the sound with slight variations, until David understood the difference. When he got it right, Ash would make a pleased rumbling noise and the bioluminescent markings would pulse brighter. By midday, David had identified what he believed were basic concepts. A specific low rumble seemed to mean safety or comfort. A higher pitch indicated alertness or attention. A complex series of frequencies appeared to be questions. And there was one sound, a soft multi-layered hum, that Ash only made when looking directly at David. He thought it might mean friend or family or something similar. Quillix visited during the afternoon shift, bringing food and supplies. The insectoid researcher spent an hour reviewing David's analysis, their antennae quivering with excitement. "This is legitimate language structure," Quillix said, "not just emotional vocalizations. There is syntax here, grammar. David, do you understand what you have discovered? Ravagers are not just intelligent. They are linguistically sophisticated. Can we use this?" David asked. "Will it be enough to convince the council?" Quillix's antennae drooped slightly. "I do not know. The council representative arrives tomorrow. Commander Silas is known for being rigid in his interpretations of council law. He lost his home colony to a Ravager attack when he was young. He will not be easily swayed." After Quillix left, David sat with Ash and tried to explain what was happening. He did not know how much the creature understood, but Ash listened intently, those intelligent eyes never leaving David's face. "Someone is coming tomorrow who wants to hurt you," David said. "I'm trying to find a way to prove you're not dangerous, that your people aren't what everyone thinks, but I don't know if it will be enough." Ash made a long, low sound. Then the creature did something unexpected. It reached out with one massive paw and gently placed it over David's chest right above his heart. The gesture was so human, so full of emotion that David felt tears prick at his eyes. "I won't let them hurt you," David promised. "I don't know how, but I'll find a way." Ash made that soft, multi-layered hum, the friend sound. Then the creature began a new vocalization. This one was longer than anything David had heard before. A story, he realized. Ash was telling him a story. David recorded everything as Ash continued. The sounds painted pictures in his mind. He could almost see what Ash was describing. A group of Ravagers living together. Young ones playing. Adults hunting and sharing food. The peaceful rhythm of a life that was nothing like what the galaxy believed about these creatures. Then the sounds changed. They became sharp, harsh, frightened. David understood this part too. Ships arriving, weapons firing, Ravagers trying to defend their young, some captured, others killed, families torn apart. The sounds conveyed grief so deep that David felt it in his bones. Ash's vocalization softened again. The creature made the friend sound, then a questioning tone. David thought he understood what Ash was asking. Why did this happen? What did we do wrong? "You did nothing wrong," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "We were afraid."
"We didn't understand."
And fear makes people do terrible things. He spent the rest of the day documenting everything. Ash's story, the language patterns, the evidence of complex social structures and emotional depth. He compiled it all into a presentation that he hoped would save Ash's life. As evening approached, Director Yara visited the chamber. Her expression was grave. "Commander Silas will arrive first thing tomorrow morning," she said. "I have been in communication with him. He is not interested in your research, David. He has his orders and he intends to follow them." "Then we change his orders," David said. "We make so much noise that the council has to listen. We broadcast this everywhere. The evidence is undeniable, Director. Ravagers are intelligent, social, peaceful, and less provoked. How can the Council condemn an entire species based on fear? You are young, Yara said not unkindly. You still believe that evidence and reason can overcome politics and prejudice. I hope you are right, but you need to prepare for the possibility that you are not. After she left, David sat with Ash in the dimming light. The creature seemed to sense his worry and pressed close, offering comfort. David ran his hand along Ash's scales, feeling the warmth and the steady breathing. I have an idea, David said slowly. It's risky, probably crazy, but it might be our only chance. Ash made a questioning sound. If we can't convince them here, we take you somewhere they can't reach you. There are independent colonies beyond Council space. Researchers who don't follow Council laws. If I can get you to one of them, you'd be safe. Even as he said it, David knew the problems with this plan. They were being monitored constantly. The station was on high alert. And even if they somehow escaped, where would they go? How would they get there? He was a graduate student, not an action hero. But Ash was listening intently. And David saw something in those eyes that looked like hope. A soft chime from his tablet interrupted his thoughts. A message from Quillix. David opened it and felt his heart skip. I may have a solution. Meet me at Observation Deck 7 during the night cycle. Come alone. Tell no one. Delete this message. David deleted the message and looked at Ash. The creature's bioluminescent markings had shifted to orange. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. Do you trust me? David asked. Ash made that multi-layered hum. The friend sound. Then the creature touched its forehead gently to David's, just like it had done after David first treated its wound. The meaning was clear. I trust you. Always. David waited until the station's night cycle, when most personnel were sleeping and monitoring was at its minimum. He told Ash to stay quiet and calm. The creature seemed to understand and settled into a resting position that would look peaceful to anyone watching the monitors. He left the habitat chamber and made his way through the dimly lit corridors to Observation Deck 7. His heart pounded with every step. If he was caught wandering around during a high-security lockdown, there would be consequences. But he had to know what Quillix had planned. The observation deck was empty except for Quillix and two other researchers David recognized. River, the kind botanist, and another human named Bennett who worked in engineering. They all looked nervous. We want to help, Quillix said without preamble. What is happening to that creature is wrong. The Council's laws are based on incomplete information and prejudice. We have been watching what you have accomplished. You have proven that Ravagers can be peaceful. We believe you deserve a chance to prove it to the rest of the galaxy. How? David asked. Bennett pulled up a schematic on a portable display. There's a research shuttle in Docking Bay 12. It's scheduled for a supply run to an independent station called Haven Colony. They operate outside Council jurisdiction. If we can get you and Ash onto that shuttle, you could escape. The bay is monitored, David said. Security is tight. We have been working on this for hours, River said softly. We can create a diversion. Multiple false alarms in different sections. Security will be spread thin. Bennett can override the bay door controls. You will have maybe 10 minutes. That is all. David looked at each of them in turn. They were risking their careers, possibly their freedom, to help a human student and a creature they barely knew. It was the kind of courage that David associated with the best parts of humanity. The willingness to do what was right even when it was difficult. Why are you doing this? He asked. Quillix's antennae quivered. Because we are scientists. We follow evidence, not fear. And the evidence says that you and Ash have shown us something beautiful. A bridge between species that should be enemies but chose to be friends instead. That is worth protecting. When? David asked. 3 hours, Bennett said. That gives you time to prepare. Pack light. The shuttle has supplies, but you will need to be fast. David nodded. He wanted to thank them, to find words that matched the enormity of what they were offering, but Quillix stopped him. No thanks needed. Just succeed. Show the galaxy what we already know. That understanding is stronger than fear. That compassion is not weakness. That humans and Ravagers and everyone else can find common ground if we are brave enough to look for it. David returned to the habitat chamber. Ash was waiting, alert and ready. The creature knew something was happening. David quickly explained the plan, not knowing how much Ash understood, but trusting that the bond between them would be enough. In 3 hours we run, David said. We're going to get you somewhere safe, but it's going to be dangerous. People might try to stop us. You can't hurt anyone, Ash, no matter what. Can you do that? Ash made a low, determined sound. Then the creature stood and moved to David's side, taking a protective stance. The message was clear. I will protect you, and I will do it your way. David gathered the few belongings he could carry. His research, his tablet with all the recordings, some basic supplies. Everything else would have to be left behind. His entire life on this station, abandoned for a creature he had known for less than 2 days. But when he looked at Ash, at those intelligent eyes and the gentle way the creature moved around him, David knew it was the right choice. This was bigger than his career or his safety. This was about doing what was right in a galaxy that had forgotten how. The clock counted down. 3 hours until they would run. 3 hours until everything changed. David sat with Ash in the quiet chamber and felt strangely calm. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The beast and the human. 2 unlikely friends against the galaxy. David could not help but smile. If this was what being human meant, standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves, then he was proud to do it. Ready? He asked Ash as the time approached. Ash's bioluminescent markings flared bright blue. The creature made that multi-layered hum one more time. Together. Always. The alarms started exactly on schedule. David heard them echoing through the station, multiple alerts from different sections all at once. Fire suppression system malfunction in the botanical wing, pressure leak in Sector 9, containment field fluctuation in the chemistry labs. None of them real emergencies, but all of them requiring immediate security response. Now, David whispered. The habitat chamber door slid open. Bennett had kept his promise and overridden the security locks. David and Ash moved quickly into the corridor. The station's night cycle lighting cast everything in soft blue tones. Emergency teams rushed past their intersection, heading toward the false alarms. No one looked twice at the side passage where David and Ash waited. They made their way through the maintenance corridors. These passages were rarely used, designed for repair crews and automated systems. Ash had to move carefully because of its size, but the creature was remarkably agile for something so large. Its bioluminescent markings were dimmed to almost nothing, making it harder to spot in the shadows. David's heart hammered as they navigated the maze of passages. His tablet showed the route Bennett had programmed. Left at the next junction. Down 2 levels, through the cargo processing area. Every step took them closer to docking bay 12, but also closer to the risk of discovery. They reached a maintenance shaft that would take them down to the correct level. David climbed down the ladder, and Ash followed, using all 6 limbs to grip the rungs. The creature moved with surprising grace, barely making a sound. Halfway down, David heard voices above them. Security teams checking the maintenance areas. He froze on the ladder, looking up at Ash. The creature had also stopped moving. Its eyes met David's in the dim light, and David saw the same question he was feeling. Should they run? Hide? Fight? David raised one finger to his lips. Ash seemed to understand. They stayed perfectly still as the voices grew louder, then gradually faded as the security team moved on to another section. David released a breath he did not know he was holding. They continued down and emerged in the cargo processing area. This was a large open space filled with containers and loading equipment. Usually it would be busy with workers, but during the night cycle it sat empty. Their footsteps echoed too loudly in the vast space. Almost there, David murmured. Docking bay 12 is just beyond that far door. They were halfway across the cargo area when lights suddenly blazed to full brightness. David and Ash froze. A voice boomed through the overhead speakers. Stop where you are. Do not move. We have weapons locked on both of you. David's stomach dropped. They had been discovered? He looked around frantically and saw security teams emerging from behind containers on all sides. At least 20 armed personnel, all with weapons trained on them. At the far end of the cargo area, Director Yara stood with her arms crossed. I'm disappointed, David, she said, walking toward them. I hoped you would be smarter than this. You knew? David asked. I know everything that happens on my station. Did you really think your friends could create diversions without me noticing? I've been monitoring this situation since Quillix first contacted you. David felt Ash tense beside him. The creature's bioluminescent markings flashed from blue to orange to red. Ash was preparing to fight, to protect David from the perceived threat. No, David said firmly, placing his hand on Ash's side. No fighting. We promised, remember? Ash made a low, distressed sound but did not move. The creature's markings stayed red, showing its agitation, but it controlled itself. You see? David called out to Director Yara. Even now, surrounded and threatened, Ash won't attack. This creature has more self-control than half the species in the galaxy give it credit for. That may be true, Yara replied, but it does not change the law. Commander Silas arrives in 4 hours. When he does, that creature will be terminated. Your escape attempt has only made things worse. Then help us, David pleaded. You've seen the research. You know Ash is intelligent, peaceful. You have the power to delay the execution order. Buy us time to make our case to the full council. Yara's expression softened slightly. I wish I could, but my hands are tied. If I openly defy a council order, they will remove me from command and send someone who will not hesitate to kill that creature. At least this way I can ensure it happens humanely. Humanely? David felt anger surge through him. You're talking about killing a sentient being whose only crime was being born to the wrong species. There's nothing humane about that. A new voice cut through the tension. Well said, young human. Everyone turned. River stepped out from behind one of the containers, her 6 arms spread wide. She was not alone. Quillix emerged from another hiding spot. Then Bennett. Then more researchers, 24 of them, from a dozen different species. They formed a loose circle around David and Ash, positioning themselves between the security teams and their targets. What is this? Yara demanded. A choice, River said gently. We are choosing to stand with David and Ash. If you want to take them, you will have to go through all of us first. The security teams looked uncertain. They had weapons, but using them on unarmed researchers would be a completely different situation than subduing an escaped creature. The standoff stretched out, tense and fragile. Yara stared at her staff in disbelief. Do you all understand what you're doing? This is mutiny. You'll lose your positions, possibly face criminal charges. We understand, Quillix said. And we accept the consequences. Because some things are more important than careers. Some truths are more important than comfortable lies. David felt overwhelmed. These people, most of whom he barely knew, were putting everything on the line for him and Ash. It was the kind of solidarity that reminded him why he loved being part of the scientific community. The search for truth above all else. But before anyone could speak again, a new alarm blared through the station. This one was different, louder, more urgent. The universal warning for incoming ships. Yara grabbed her communicator. Status report now. A voice crackled through. Director, we have a Galactic Council warship dropping out of hyperspace. They're 4 hours early. Commander Silas is hailing us and demanding immediate access to the station. Yara's face went pale. She looked at David, then at Ash, then at the gathered researchers. David could see her making calculations, weighing options, deciding what kind of person she wanted to be in this moment. Docking Bay 12, she said suddenly. Go, now. You have maybe 5 minutes before Silas docks and takes control of station security. David stared at her. You're letting us go? I'm choosing to be very slow in responding to alarms during a shift change, Yara said. If you happen to escape in that time, well, these things happen on large stations. Now move before I change my mind. The researchers immediately cleared a path. David and Ash ran toward the docking bay entrance, with Quillix and Bennett racing ahead to prepare the shuttle. Behind them, David heard Yara ordering the security teams to stand down and begin evacuation procedures for the incoming council ship. They burst into docking bay 12. The small research shuttle sat ready, its engines already warming up thanks to Bennett's preparations. The bay doors were cycling open, revealing the starfield beyond. Get in, Quillix shouted over the roar of the engines. We loaded supplies. Enough for 2 weeks if you ration carefully. The coordinates for Haven Colony are programmed into the navigation system. David climbed into the shuttle with Ash right behind him. The creature barely fit in the passenger compartment, but managed to squeeze in and settle along one wall. David strapped himself into the pilot's seat, his hands shaking as he ran through the startup sequence. Through the bay windows, he could see the council warship approaching. It was massive, bristling with weapons, painted in the harsh white and gold colors of council authority. David's time had just run out. You should go, David called to Quillix and Bennett. Before Silas sees you helping us. Too late for that, Bennett said with a grin. Besides, we want to see this. Go save that creature, David. Show the galaxy what we already know. David felt tears sting his eyes, but he blinked them away. There would be time for emotions later. Right now, he needed to fly. He activated the engines and the shuttle lifted off the bay floor. The controls felt strange in his hands. David was not a trained pilot, had only used simulators during basic safety training, but the shuttle was designed to be simple, and the navigation computer would do most of the work once they were clear of the station. The Council warship was closing fast, and David could see smaller craft launching from its bays. Pursuit ships. They would be faster and better armed than his research shuttle. "Hold on, Ash," David said. "This is going to be rough." He pushed the throttle forward and the shuttle shot through the bay doors into open space. Alarms immediately started blaring. The Council ships had locked weapons onto them. David jerked the controls, sending the shuttle into an erratic spiral that hopefully made them harder to hit. Weapons fire streaked past them, bright orange bolts that would have vaporized the shuttle if they connected. David had no combat training, no experience with evasive maneuvers. He was flying on instinct and desperation, and it showed. The shuttle rocked as an energy blast clipped their rear deflector. Ash made a distressed sound, and David felt the creature's paw come to rest on his shoulder. Not interfering, just offering support, letting David know he was not alone. "I know, buddy," David said through gritted teeth. "I'm doing my best." More Council ships appeared, trying to box them in. David dove toward the planet below, using its gravity to build speed. The pursuit ships matched his move, staying right on his tail. They were toying with him, he realized. They could have destroyed the shuttle 10 times over. They wanted to capture them alive. Then something unexpected happened. New ships appeared on David's sensors. Not Council vessels. These were smaller, more varied in design. Independent ships from Haven Colony, he guessed, along with free traders and research vessels. They positioned themselves between David's shuttle and the Council ships, creating a barrier. A voice crackled over the comm system. "Research shuttle, this is Captain Warren of the Free Trader Nomad. We've been following your story. That stunt you pulled with the Ravager has been broadcast across half the galaxy. A lot of folks out here think you deserve a chance to reach safety. We're going to buy you some time." David felt a surge of hope. "Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank us yet, just fly. Get that creature to Haven Colony and prove everyone wrong about them. We're counting on you." The independent ships engaged the Council pursuit craft, not with weapons but with positioning. They blocked firing lanes, forced the Council ships to slow down, created chaos in the pursuit pattern. It would not hold for long, but it gave David the opening he needed. He pushed the engines to maximum and activated the faster-than-light drive. The shuttle shuddered as it built up the energy needed to jump to hyperspace. 5 seconds, 4, 3. A Council ship broke through the blockade and locked weapons. 2 seconds, 1. The shuttle jumped. Space twisted around them, colors streaming past the windows as they entered hyperspace. Behind them, the Council ships and the battle faded into nothing. They were away, free, safe, at least for now. David slumped in the pilot's seat, exhausted and shaking with adrenaline. They had done it. Against all odds, they had actually escaped. Ash made a low, questioning sound. David looked back at the creature and saw concern in those intelligent eyes. Ash was asking if David was okay, checking on him even after everything they had just been through. "I'm fine," David said. "We're both fine. We're going to make it, Ash. We're going to find Haven Colony and we're going to show them who you really are. And then the galaxy is going to have to listen." Ash's bioluminescent markings glowed a soft, peaceful blue. The creature moved forward carefully and rested its massive head on David's lap. The gesture was trusting and gentle and full of hope. David ran his hand along Ash's scales, feeling the warmth and the steady breathing. They had lost everything. Their home, their safety, their old lives. But they had gained something too. They had proven that understanding could triumph over fear. That friendship could bridge the gap between the most unlikely companions. That courage meant standing up for what was right, even when the entire galaxy stood against you. The shuttle's navigation computer chirped, displaying their route to Haven Colony. 14 days of travel through hyperspace. 14 days to prepare their case, to refine their research, to get ready to change the galaxy's mind about Ravagers. David looked at Ash and the creature looked back at him. No words needed. They both understood. This was just the beginning. The hard part was still ahead. But whatever came next, they would face it together. The beast and the human. The student and his unlikely protector. Two friends who should have been enemies, sailing through the stars toward an uncertain future. But for the first time since this whole ordeal began, David felt genuinely hopeful. They had made it this far. They would make it the rest of the way too. Together. Always. Haven Colony appeared on the view screen like a promise of sanctuary. The station was smaller than orbital station Meridian, built from mismatched modules that had been added over decades. It hung in orbit around a blue-green planet that had never been fully charted by the Council. This was independent space where scientists and freethinkers operated outside the reach of galactic politics. David guided the shuttle toward the docking coordinates, his hands more confident on the controls after 2 weeks of travel. Beside him, Ash watched the station approach with interest. The creature's bioluminescent markings pulsed a curious yellow-green color. "This is our new home," David said. "At least for a while. The people here should be more open-minded than the Council should be." The shuttle docked smoothly, and David took a moment to collect himself before opening the hatch. He had no idea what kind of reception they would receive. The journey had given him time to refine his research, to document everything about Ash's language and behavior. But would it be enough? The docking bay was crowded when they emerged. David counted at least 50 people, aliens from 24 species, all watching silently. At the front of the group stood an elderly alien with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her face. Her skin was a deep purple, and she moved with the careful grace of someone very old but still sharp. "I am Dr. Amara," she said, her voice warm despite the formal introduction. "Welcome to Haven Colony. We have been following your story with great interest." Her 4 eyes focused on Ash. "And this is the Ravager who has caused such trouble for the Council." Ash made a low, uncertain sound. The creature moved closer to David, not hiding but clearly nervous about so many strangers. David placed a reassuring hand on Ash's side. "This is Ash," David said. "And Ash is not trouble. Ash is proof that the galaxy has been wrong about Ravagers for decades." Dr. Amara smiled. "I believe you, we all do. That is why you are here. Come, let me show you to your quarters. You both must be exhausted from your journey." The crowd parted as they walked through. David noticed that while some people kept their distance from Ash, others looked fascinated rather than afraid. A few even made welcoming gestures. It was so different from the fear and hostility they had faced on Meridian Station. Their quarters were in the xenobiology wing, a large space that had been modified to accommodate Ash's size. There was equipment for David's research, comfortable places to rest, and large windows that looked out at the stars. "This is incredible," David said. "Thank you." "Thank us by succeeding," Dr. Amara replied. "Your escape has become a symbol, David. Across the galaxy, people are talking about the human who stood up to the Council to protect a creature everyone else feared. Some call you a fool, but many more call you a hero. They want to believe that understanding is possible. That peace between species can be real. You carry their hopes now." After she left, David and Ash settled into their new space. The weeks of travel had brought them even closer. David could now recognize dozens of Ash's vocalizations and their meanings. Ash, in turn, had learned to understand basic human gestures and some simple words. They had developed a hybrid communication system that worked remarkably well. That first week at Haven Colony was intense. David worked with Dr. Amara and her team to conduct proper behavioral studies. Ash participated willingly, even eagerly. The tests revealed what David had suspected. Ravagers had problem-solving abilities on par with some of the galaxy's recognized intelligent species. They had long-term memory, empathy, and the capacity for abstract thought. More importantly, Ash began teaching them about Ravager culture. Using a combination of vocalizations, drawings, and gestures, Ash explained how Ravager family groups worked. They were tightly bonded, with complex social hierarchies based on cooperation rather than dominance. Young Ravagers were raised communally, with all adults sharing responsibility for teaching and protection. Conflict between groups was resolved through ritual displays rather than violence. Everything Ash shared painted a picture of a sophisticated, peaceful species that had been driven to violence by invasion and persecution. The galaxy's great monsters were actually victims defending their families. "We need to share this with others," David said during a research meeting. "Other stations need to see what we're seeing." Dr. Amara agreed. "We have been preparing something. There are still 3 Ravagers in captivity on various Council research stations. Using Ash's vocalizations, we have been attempting to communicate with them. The results are promising. The captive Ravagers respond positively to recordings of Ash's peaceful communication sounds. They become calmer, more cooperative. So we're not just proving one Ravager is intelligent, David realized. We're showing that all of them are, that the species as a whole has been misjudged. Exactly, but we need to be careful. The Council is actively searching for you. Commander Silas has made it his personal mission to bring you in. Haven Colony's independence will only protect us for so long. As if summoned by the mention of his name, an alert sounded through the station. A Council ship had entered the system and was requesting permission to dock. Commander Silas had found them. David felt his stomach drop, but Dr. Amara remained calm. I expected this. Silas is persistent, but he cannot simply take you by force, not here. However, he can request a formal meeting, and refusing would give him grounds to claim we are harboring criminals. What do? We agree to meet him, and we show him the truth. An hour later, Commander Silas arrived at the station with a security escort. He was a tall humanoid with metallic skin and eyes that glowed a cold blue. When he saw David and Ash in the meeting room, his expression hardened. You have caused considerable trouble, Silas said. Evading Council authority, stealing a research vessel, harboring a classified threat. Ash is not a threat, David replied, and I have proof. I am not interested in your proof. I have my orders. Then you are not a scientist, Dr. Amara interjected. You are a soldier following orders without question. We deal in evidence here, Commander. Would you like to see what we have learned, or would you prefer to remain ignorant? Silas glared at her, but David could see the internal conflict. The commander had not become a high-ranking council officer by being stupid. Curiosity warred with duty on his face. Show me, Silas finally said, but it will not change anything. David presented everything they had learned over the past week. Ash's language structure, the behavioral studies showing complex problem-solving, the cultural information about Ravager social groups, the responses from captive Ravagers to peaceful communication attempts. The evidence was overwhelming. Throughout the presentation, Ash sat quietly beside David. The creature's bioluminescent markings stayed a calm blue. When Silas looked directly at Ash, the creature did not bare its teeth or show aggression. Instead, Ash tilted its head and made a soft, questioning sound. What did it just say? Silas demanded. David consulted his translation notes. Ash asked why you were sad. The vocalization indicates Ash senses grief in you. Silas went very still. That is impossible. It is an animal. It cannot sense emotions. Ash senses emotions better than most sentient species, Dr. Amara said gently. Ravagers are highly empathic. It is part of their social bonding mechanism. Ash knows you have experienced loss, and Ash is expressing sympathy. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Silas did something unexpected. He sat down heavily in a chair, his rigid military bearing crumbling. My family, he said quietly. My entire colony. Destroyed by Ravagers when I was 16 years old. I watched it happen. I have spent my life ensuring no one else suffers the same fate. David felt a surge of sympathy. I am sorry for your loss, truly. But Commander, have you ever investigated what provoked that attack? What your colony might have done before the Ravagers responded? Provoked? We were innocent civilians, were you? Or were you settlers on a world that belonged to them first? Were there mining operations? Scientific expeditions that captured Ravager young for study? Silas looked up sharply. How did you know about the expeditions? Because it follows the pattern. Every Ravager attack in the historical records came after humans or other species invaded their territory. They are not mindless killers, Commander. They are parents protecting their children, warriors defending their homes, just like you would do if someone invaded your world and took your family. Ash made a low, mournful sound. The creature slowly approached Silas, moving carefully to appear non-threatening. The security escort raised their weapons, but Silas held up a hand to stop them. Ash stopped a few feet from the commander and lowered its massive head. Then it did something that made everyone in the room catch their breath. The creature made a specific vocalization that David recognized. It was the grief sound, the one Ash used when telling stories about lost family members. Ash was expressing shared sorrow. The creature was telling Silas that it understood his pain because Ash had experienced the same loss. Silas stared at the Ravager. His glowing eyes dimmed slightly, and David realized the commander was crying. Silently, without obvious tears, but crying nonetheless. All this time, Silas whispered. All this time I thought I was preventing attacks, but I was just perpetuating the cycle. More families separated, more grief on both sides. He stood slowly and approached Ash. The creature remained still, patient, understanding. Silas reached out with one trembling hand and touched Ash's forehead. "I am sorry," Silas said, "for what was done to your people. For what I have done believing I was right." Ash made that soft, multi-layered humming sound. The friend sound. The forgiveness sound. The creature leaned into the commander's touch, accepting the apology. David felt tears running down his own face. This was what he had hoped for. Not just proving Ash was intelligent, but showing that understanding could heal even the deepest wounds. That enemies could become friends if they were brave enough to look past their fear and anger. Over the following weeks, Commander Silas became an unlikely ally. He used his position to delay the execution orders for captive Ravagers, claiming he needed time to verify David's research. He provided access to Council databases that contained information about the original Ravager conflicts. Everything confirmed David's theory. The species had been defending themselves against invasion. Silas also helped David make contact with wild Ravager populations. Using Ash's vocalizations, they sent peaceful communication attempts into the outer reach. The responses that came back were cautious but not hostile. The Ravagers were willing to talk, to attempt understanding if approached with respect rather than weapons. Haven Colony became the center of a new movement. Researchers from across the galaxy began arriving, wanting to study peaceful Ravager communication. Some brought captive Ravagers with them, requesting that David and Ash help rehabilitate the traumatized creatures. The first rehabilitation was difficult. The captive Ravager, who David named Storm because of the dark coloring on its scales, had spent 3 years in a cage. It was aggressive and frightened, lashing out at anyone who approached. But when Ash spoke to Storm in their shared language, something changed. David watched as Ash communicated with Storm for hours. The vocalizations were complex, full of emotion and meaning that David could only partially understand. But he saw the effect. Storm gradually calmed. The aggressive posturing stopped. The creature began to respond, slowly learning to trust again. By the end of the week, Storm was eating from David's hand. By the end of the month, Storm had bonded with one of the Haven Colony researchers and was participating in language studies. News of the rehabilitation spread. More stations contacted Haven Colony, asking for help with their captive Ravagers. Each success built momentum. The evidence became impossible to deny. Ravagers were intelligent, social, and capable of peaceful coexistence with other species. But the Council remained officially unmoved. The laws classifying Ravagers as existential threats stayed in place. Powerful members of the Council had built careers on anti-Ravager policies. They would not change easily. "We need something bigger," David said during a strategy meeting. "Something so undeniable that even the most stubborn Council members have to acknowledge the truth." Dr. Amara looked thoughtful. "What if we brought Ash to the Council directly? Let them see firsthand what we have learned?" "They would never allow it," Silas said. "The security risk alone would be grounds for refusal." "Then we broadcast it," David said suddenly. "We request a formal hearing broadcast across the entire galaxy. Let billions of people watch as we present our evidence. Let public opinion force the Council to act. It was risky. If they failed publicly, the backlash would be severe. But if they succeeded, they could change everything." "I will make it happen," Silas promised. "I still have enough influence to force a hearing. But David, you need to understand, this will be your only chance. If the Council rejects your evidence after a public hearing, there will be no more appeals. The execution orders will be carried out immediately." David looked at Ash. The creature had been listening to the entire conversation, and those intelligent eyes held understanding. Ash knew what was at stake. The creature made a determined sound and pressed its forehead against David's chest. "Together. Always." "We will do it," David said. "We will go to the Council and show them the truth. And the galaxy will have to listen." The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room David had ever seen. It stretched upward for what seemed like miles, with seating arranged in concentric rings that held representatives from hundreds of worlds. Holographic displays floated everywhere, showing real-time translations and data feeds. At the center of it all was a small platform where David and Ash would make their case. The hearing was being broadcast to every corner of known space. Billions of beings were watching. David felt the weight of their attention like a physical pressure. Ash stood beside him, perfectly still despite the overwhelming environment. The creature's bioluminescent markings glowed a steady, calm blue. David drew strength from that calm. If Ash could face this with courage, so could he. The council speaker, an ancient being whose species David did not recognize, called the session to order. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of translation devices. This hearing concerns the classification of the species known as ravagers, the speaker announced. David Chen, human researcher, has requested a review of this classification based on new evidence. You may begin your presentation. David stepped forward. His hands wanted to shake, but he forced them to be steady. He had practiced this presentation 100 times. He knew every word, every piece of evidence, every argument. But standing here, facing the collected authority of the galaxy, felt different than any practice session. Honored council members, David began. I stand before you today to present evidence that will challenge everything we thought we knew about ravagers. For decades, we have classified them as mindless predators, existential threats to be destroyed on sight. But we were wrong. Terribly, tragically wrong. He activated his data displays. Holographic images filled the air around him. Recordings of Ash's vocalizations with accompanying analysis, behavioral studies, problem-solving tests, cultural information. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Ravagers are not monsters, David continued. They are people. They have language, culture, family structures. They feel love and grief. They can reason, create, and communicate. Everything we attributed to mindless aggression was actually defensive behavior from a species trying to protect their families from invasion. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some council members leaned forward with interest. Others looked skeptical or angry. David pressed on. I know this is difficult to accept. Many of you have lost people to Ravager attacks. I understand that pain. Commander Silas, who is here today, lost his entire family. But he has also had the courage to look past his grief and see the truth. Commander, would you like to speak? Silas stood from where he had been seated in the observers section. The chamber fell silent as the decorated military officer approached the platform. I spent 40 years hunting Ravagers, Silas said, his voice carrying clearly despite his emotion. I believed I was protecting the galaxy from monsters. But David Chen showed me that the real monster was my own refusal to see the truth. The Ravagers who destroyed my colony were not attacking for pleasure or conquest. They were rescuing their children from our research facilities. We took their young first. They responded with the same fierce protective instinct that any parent would feel. He walked to Ash and placed his hand on the creature's head. Ash made a soft sound and leaned into the touch. This being offered me forgiveness I did not deserve, Silas continued. Showed me compassion when I had shown its species only violence. If Ravagers are monsters, then they are better monsters than we are people. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some council members were moved by Silas's testimony. Others shouted that he had been manipulated or compromised. The speaker called for order, but the chaos continued. Then Ash did something that silenced everyone. The creature stepped forward to the center of the platform and began to vocalize. But these were not the simple sounds David had recorded. This was something else. A complex, layered harmonic that filled the entire chamber. The sound was beautiful, haunting, and unmistakably intelligent. It told a story in pure emotion and meaning. David listened, tears streaming down his face as Ash sang the history of the Ravager people. Their peaceful existence before first contact. The terror of ships descending from the sky. Children taken and never returned. Parents searching desperately for their lost young. The grief when some were never found. The fierce determination to protect those who remained. The hope that someday someone would listen, someone would understand. The song ended. The chamber was absolutely silent. Even the most hardened council members looked shaken. This was not the vocalization of an animal. This was art, poetry, history. This was the voice of a sentient species crying out for recognition. You heard it, David said quietly. All of you heard it. Can you still call them monsters? Can you still justify their extermination? A council member from a reptilian species stood. The evidence is compelling. But how do we know this is not an isolated case? One intelligent Ravager does not prove the entire species is sentient. Show them, Dr. Amara called from the observers section. She activated her own data display. We have been communicating with captive Ravagers across the galaxy, using the language David decoded. Every single one has responded with similar intelligence and complexity. This is not an isolated case. This is an entire species we have been systematically destroying out of ignorance and fear. More data filled the displays. Video recordings of captive ravagers responding to peaceful communication. Behavioral changes showing increased cooperation and reduced aggression. Rehabilitation successes. The evidence kept mounting, piece after undeniable piece. A council member stood, her voice sharp. Even if we accept that ravagers are intelligent, they are still dangerous. They have killed thousands. How do we guarantee our safety? David looked at Ash. The creature met his eyes and made a sound that David had learned meant trust and friendship. He turned back to the council. The same way any species guarantees safety, David said. Through communication, mutual respect, and understanding. Humans were once considered dangerous predators, too. We hunted megafauna to extinction on our homeworld. We fought wars that killed millions. But we also learned to cooperate, to form alliances, to see past our differences. That is what makes us truly intelligent. Not our capacity for violence, but our capacity for peace. He walked to Ash and placed his hand on the creature's side. Ash could have killed me a dozen times. That first night when we met, I was completely defenseless. But Ash chose mercy, chose trust, chose to believe that I could be a friend instead of an enemy. Can we be brave enough to make the same choice? The speaker called for a recess. The council members withdrew to deliberate. David and Ash were escorted to a waiting area. Hours passed in tense silence. Dr. Amara, Silas, Quillix, River, and the others who had helped them sat nearby, offering quiet support. Finally, the council reconvened. David and Ash returned to the platform. The chamber was packed with observers, and the holographic feeds showed that viewership across the galaxy had reached unprecedented levels. Everyone wanted to know what the council would decide. The speaker stood. The council has reviewed all evidence presented. We have also consulted with our own xenobiology experts who have confirmed the validity of David Chen's research. After much debate, we have reached a decision. David held his breath. Ash pressed close against his side. The classification of ravagers as existential threats is hereby revoked, the speaker announced. Effective immediately, they are recognized as a sentient species with full protection under Galactic Council law. All captive ravagers are to be released and provided rehabilitation support. Military operations in the Outer Reach are suspended pending the establishment of diplomatic relations. David felt his knees go weak. They had done it. Actually done it. Ash made a sound of pure joy, and David hugged the creature, not caring that billions of people were watching. But the speaker was not finished. Furthermore, the council recognizes David Chen for his extraordinary courage and dedication to the pursuit of truth. And we recognize Commander Silas for his willingness to question his own beliefs in the face of new evidence. You have both shown us what it means to be truly civilized. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to look past it. The chamber erupted in applause. Not everyone was clapping. David could see some council members who looked angry or dissatisfied. Change was never easy, and this decision would have far-reaching consequences. But it was the right decision. For the first time in decades, the galaxy had chosen understanding over fear. In the months that followed, David and Ash became ambassadors of a sort. They traveled to research stations and colonies, teaching others how to communicate peacefully with ravagers. Captive ravagers were released and rehabilitated. Some chose to return to their home territories. Others, like Ash, decided to stay and help build bridges between species. David established the Institute for Interspecies Understanding at Haven Colony. Dr. Amara served as the director, and Commander Silas headed security, ensuring that all interactions with ravagers were peaceful and respectful. Researchers from across the galaxy came to study and learn. The wild ravager populations in the Outer Reach were cautiously receptive to contact. They remembered the violence of the past, but they also recognized the genuine attempts at peace. Slowly, carefully, diplomatic relations began to form. The first Ravager representatives arrived at the Galactic Council, speaking through translators who had learned their language from Ash. Not everything was perfect. There were incidents. Some humans and aliens still feared Ravagers and attacked on sight. Some Ravagers, traumatized by years of persecution, responded with violence. But each conflict was investigated, addressed, and used as a learning opportunity. The cycle of automatic violence was broken. David never finished his original thesis. He did not need to. His work with Ash had become the most important xenobiology research in galactic history. Universities offered him positions. Research grants poured in. But David chose to stay at Haven Colony, continuing his work with Ash and the growing population of Ravagers who were learning to trust again. One evening, David sat in his quarters watching the sunset through the colony windows. Ash lay beside him as always, the creature's presence a constant comfort. Storm, the first Ravager David and Ash had rehabilitated, was also there with his own human partner, a young researcher named River who had bonded with Storm just as deeply as David had bonded with Ash. "Do you ever regret it?" River asked. "You gave up your old life, your career plans, everything." David thought about the question. His old life seemed like something from a different universe. The nervous graduate student working late in a lab, afraid to take risks, content to study life from a safe distance. That person was gone. In his place was someone who had learned what it meant to truly live, to stand up for what was right, to choose compassion over fear. "Not for a second," David said. Ash made that soft, multi-layered hum. The friend sound. The family sound. The creature rested its massive head on David's lap, and David ran his hand along the familiar scales. 3 years ago, a power failure had opened a chamber door. A frightened human had faced a supposed monster. And in that moment of crisis, both had chosen trust over violence. That choice had changed everything. The galaxy was not perfect. Fear and prejudice still existed. But now there was also hope. Hope that understanding was possible. That peace was achievable. That different species, no matter how alien they seemed to each other, could find common ground. David looked at Ash, and Ash looked back at him. No words needed. Their bond transcended language, transcended species, transcended everything that should have made them enemies. They were family, not by blood or biology, but by choice, by the conscious decision to see each other not as threats, but as people. "What do you think comes next?" River asked. "For you and Ash?" David smiled. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Ash's bioluminescent markings glowed a peaceful blue. The creature made a sound that David had long since learned to interpret perfectly. A sound that meant home, safety, belonging. A sound that said everything that mattered. Together. Always. Forever. Outside the windows, the stars stretched endlessly. Each one potentially held life, held species that were different and strange and possibly frightening. But they also held possibility. The possibility of friendship, of understanding, of peace. The beast had broken free. The human had stood guard. And together they had shown the galaxy something it desperately needed to see. That compassion was not weakness. That understanding was not surrender. That the bravest thing anyone could do was to look at something they feared and choose to see a person instead of a monster. It was a lesson the galaxy would not forget. And it all started with a graduate student who was too stubborn to run away, and a creature who was too kind to attack. Two unlikely friends who had saved each other, and in doing so had saved so much more. The sun set over Haven Colony, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. David sat with his family, human and Ravager, together, and felt something he had not felt in years. Complete peace. The galaxy still had problems to solve. There would be setbacks and challenges ahead. But for the first time in generations, there was real hope. Hope that all species, no matter how different, could find a way to coexist, to understand. To become not just neighbors in the galaxy, but friends. And it all began with a beast who broke free and guarded a human student like its own. A simple act of kindness in a moment of crisis. Proof that the best parts of humanity, and the best parts of every species, were stronger than fear. David closed his eyes and leaned against Ash, feeling the steady heartbeat of his closest friend. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The beast and the human. The student and his unlikely protector. Two people who had chosen love over fear and changed the galaxy forever. Together. Always. Forever. The end.